This incident took place on October 7, 1985, when the Italian cruise ship Achille Lauro arrived at the port of Alexandria in Egypt. It was the fifth day of its voyage, which had started from Genoa. On board were 748 passengers and 450 crew members. At Alexandria, 651 passengers disembarked, planning to take buses to visit the pyramids of Egypt. The captain then set sail with the remaining 97 passengers, heading toward Port Said, located approximately 225 kilometers to the west. Initially, everything seemed normal, but within a few hours, the situation began to change. Around 10:30 p.m., when the tourists reached Port Said, they expected to reunite with their companions, but suddenly, there was no sign of the Achille Lauro. At first, it was reported that the ship was delayed due to traffic in the Suez Canal, but after waiting for 3 hours, the truth became clear. The ship had been hijacked. Welcome viewers, Retro Realms. The Achille Lauro spent several hours off the coast of Syria, but when it was denied permission to enter the country, the hijackers transmitted their demands to the Syrian government via radio. The hijacking was led by Yusuf Majid al-Mulki, who made it clear that he belonged to the PFLF, the Palestine Liberation Front, and that their goal was to secure the release of 50 of their comrades from Israel. Now everything was clear. The people claiming to be Norwegian citizens were, in fact, Palestinian militants. Yusuf al-Mulki threatened that if the Jewish passengers on the ship were not released by 3 p.m., he would begin killing them one by one. The situation became even more complicated, as Syria, Israel, and Palestine were now all directly involved. The hijackers' deadline was approaching, but neither their demands had been met, nor had any negotiation team reached the ship. At 3 p.m., the hijackers sent a threatening message to Port Tartus in Syria. "We have killed one American hostage, and the next one is next." However, Syrian authorities completely ignored them and said, "Leave here immediately." When the hijackers realized they would not succeed in Syria, they ordered the captain to take the ship to Cyprus. Meanwhile, news spread across global intelligence networks that an American passenger had been killed, though this had not been confirmed. Italy then contacted Yasser Arafat directly, who was at the time the leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization. Italy asked whether the PLO had any connection to this hijacking. Arafat not only denied involvement, but also sent a negotiation team to Egypt to help resolve the issue. This team included Abu Abbas, the leader of the PLF. Abu Abbas contacted the hijackers through a radio station in Cyprus and said, "Immediately head to Port Said, Egypt, and treat all passengers well." Yusuf al-Mulki agreed to Abu Abbas' instructions, and the captain was ordered to steer the ship toward Port Said, Egypt. Upon arrival in Egypt, Abu Abbas met with the captain and held separate talks with the hijackers, trying to peacefully resolve the situation. Both Italy and Egypt wanted the matter resolved without conflict, because if the situation escalated, it could have repercussions for Palestine, Israel, and the Arab world. But the US position was firm. These were terrorists, and no negotiations should take place with them. Despite US pressure, Italy and Egypt continued negotiations and planned to hand the hijackers over to the Palestinian Authority so they could face justice. The next day, October 9, Captain Gerardo Di Rosa announced over the radio, "All passengers and crew on the ship are safe." The hijackers disembarked and disappeared into mainland Egypt, and everyone believed the negotiations had succeeded. But in reality, the story was far from over. A few of the hijackers were Palestinian militants who had hidden their weapons in fuel tanks, causing a foul odor to spread through their rooms. As soon as the ship departed, they stayed in their rooms, using hair dryers to dry their weapons. During this, a waiter accidentally entered their room, exposing their secret. Immediately, they moved to the dining hall and began taking the remaining passengers hostage. The passengers still didn't know who these people were or what their intentions were. One hostess asked, "Who are you?" A hijacker replied, "We are citizens of Norway." Meanwhile, the radio operator in the radio room sent out an SOS call. "Achille Lauro has been hijacked." This message reached a radio station in Sweden. The hijackers quickly seized the radio room and shut down the ship's communication system. Then they summoned the captain over the loudspeaker. When Captain Gerardo arrived, he was confronted at gunpoint. The hijacker leader spoke something in Arabic and then gave orders in broken English to take the ship 500 kilometers away, toward Port Tartus in Syria. The captain immediately realized that these people could not possibly be Norwegian citizens. He was instructed to allow the crew to continue their duties as usual, but not to approach any of the hostages. Now the ship was heading toward Syria instead of Port Said, and all passengers and crew were terrified about what would happen next. Night had fallen, and the hijackers ordered the passengers to sleep on the deck floor. Meanwhile, the SOS call broadcast from Sweden caused a global uproar. The Italian government's crisis management team was activated. At first, they did not take it too seriously, but when it became clear that American citizens were also on board, the US government stepped in. To the United States, this was a terrorist attack, and their policy was not to negotiate with terrorists. The complication was that this hijacking directly involved 3 countries. The passengers were Italian, the ship was Italian, the incident occurred in Egypt. The debate then was over which country should take action. The US argued that since the ship was Italian, Italy should act first, but the Italian government preferred resolving the matter through negotiations to avoid damage to its reputation in the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, the hijackers began separating hostages based on nationality. It appeared as though they were looking for American and Jewish passengers. They singled out 20 passengers, including an elderly couple, Marley and Leon Klinghoffer, who were in a wheelchair. The hijackers told Leon to go to the upper deck, but due to his condition, he could not move. His wife protested, but the hijackers silenced her at gunpoint. Abu Abbas managed to persuade the hijackers to surrender their weapons, and on the surface, it appeared that all demands had been withdrawn. But in reality, the hijackers had already forced Captain Gerardo Di Rosa to broadcast a false message over the radio, claiming that all passengers were safe. The truth, however, was the opposite. Leon, who was in a wheelchair, was shot and thrown into the Mediterranean Sea. Hours later, when the news reached the world, it sent shockwaves across the globe. The hijackers were allowed to go free, making it clear that they had committed a serious crime and disappeared into Egyptian territory. Italy demanded that Egypt immediately hand over the hijackers, but Egypt backed off, saying, "The hijackers have left Egypt, and we have no idea where they are." According to intelligence reports, Egypt was planning to send all 4 hijackers to Tunisia, where PLO representatives were to take them into custody. On the evening of October 10, an Egyptair flight was ready. All 4 hijackers boarded the plane and were headed for Tunisia. However, neither the hijackers, nor Egypt, nor Italy knew that the US crisis team planned to intercept this flight midair. Above the Mediterranean, 4 F-14 fighter jets, 2 KC-10 tankers, and 2 E-2C radar planes were already patrolling. As the Egyptian plane took off, the US F-14 surrounded it and ordered the pilot to land at the NATO base Sigonella on the Italian island of Sicily. The pilot attempted to contact Egypt, but the American radar planes jammed all radio signals. With no options left, the pilot landed at Sigonella Air Base at 12:10 a.m. on the night of October 11. The operation was so secretive that Italy itself was informed only after the plane had landed on its soil. Since the plane had landed in Italy, and the Achille Lauro was also an Italian ship, and the murder had occurred within Italian jurisdiction, legally, Italy had the primary right to take the hijackers into custody. However, the US demanded that the hijackers be handed over to them. As a result, 80 US commandos and 300 Italian commandos faced each other at the NATO base, weapons drawn. Diplomatic tension between Italy and the US lasted for hours. Finally, Washington ordered the US forces to stand down, and it was agreed that the trial for the hijackers would take place in Italy. The Italian forces searched the plane, and along with the 4 hijackers, they also found Abu Abbas, who had been sent as the negotiation representative by Egypt. There was suspicion that the entire hijacking might have been planned by Abu Abbas, but as there was no solid evidence against him, Italy released him. All 4 hijackers were tried and received heavy sentences. Investigations revealed that the original plan was not just to hijack the ship, but to attempt to use it as a weapon for an attack on Israel. Leon Klinghoffer's body was recovered from the Syrian coast on October 13, and later returned to his home in the United States. Thus ended the harrowing saga of the Achille Lauro hijacking, which shook the world and proved that a single wrong decision can reverberate across global politics.